Other economic statistics are starting to get a little bit better, but this one's a big cloud. Yeah. Big cloud. Jess, thanks. Let's get some more perspective on this issue now. John Hofmeister is the former president of Shell Oil Company and the founder and CEO of Citizens for Affordable Energy. John, is the president right? He says the oil companies don't need these tax subsidies anymore. And if you look at the numbers, the top 5 big oil companies last year made nearly $133 billion. If you do the math, that's $15 million an hour.
I don't think it's a matter of financial need. I think what I testified when I was still at Shell and what I've heard other CEOs testify is if we start selecting companies because of their profitability and discriminate against selective companies that are successful, well, we really ought to start with Apple or pharmaceutical companies. Their return on investment, their profit margins are far higher than oil companies. The issue here is, and I testified to this, what about the totality of the tax code when the bigger problem is the competitiveness of American companies versus the rest of the world? And let's deal with the entirety of it rather than just focus on a few companies.
As you know, there's a lot of finger-pointing around the country, and especially here in the town I work in, Washington, over who's responsible for the pain Americans are going through at the pump right now. Republicans say this president has not allowed enough domestic production. Well, today, he tried to rebut his critics. Let's listen.
But the fact is, we're producing more oil right now than we have in 8 years, and we're importing less of it as well. For 2 years in a row, America has bought less oil from other countries than we produce here at home, for the first time in over a decade. So American oil is booming.
Well, everybody's right and everybody's wrong. Where the actions being taken today, that the results we're seeing today were decisions that were made 3 to 4 years ago when we had the previous high oil price period. So fortunately, private landowners and states have granted permits to enable the increased production to occur. But let's be clear, the Gulf of Mexico is in decline because of the moratorium and the slowed down permits since the moratorium. Federal drilling on federal land is down about 40% in the last 3 years. So for the president to take credit for what's happening on private lands under state permits, he can take credit for it, and in that sense it has happened. But if you really look at what do we need so much more, John. We need so much more domestic production. Let's get to 10 million barrels a day where we used to be. What the president's talking about is a 200,000 to 300,000 barrel a day increase. That's incremental. We're importing 10 million barrels a day, and we need 20. So let's produce 10 like we used to. Then let's turn natural gas into transportation fuel like we've been talking about. It needs a plan. It needs leadership. We can fix this problem, but only if we get serious about it.
The question is serious about it, and Washington hasn't been able to have a comprehensive energy debate in some time because of political differences. And what happens is, at the moment, the average price for a gallon of gas is $3.92 a gallon, AAA says. Last month it was $3.71. A year ago it was $3.59. Is there any end to the increases in sight? And when people are mad, in our new polling, 90% blame the oil companies, 83% blame foreign countries, 78% say it's the situation in Iran, 64% say it's the president, 58% say it's the Republicans, so the people blame everybody.
And I understand why they blame everybody, because you don't get a straight story from anybody. And so let's blame everybody. The reality is, domestic energy companies can only produce when they have permits to do so. The vast amount of oil is on federal land and in offshore locations. And their permits are not forthcoming. So you blame the government. Don't blame the oil companies. On the other hand, we have had this problem for so long. We have been living on imports for so long that it's not just this administration, it's every Republican administration since Nixon, it's every Democratic administration since Carter that has seen this coming and done nothing. And this is the case of this administration as well.
John Hofmeister, as always, thank you.
Thank you.
The Republican Party still hasn't picked its presidential nominee, but the vice presidential chatter is beginning. Coming up, the truth about the man or woman